Hey everyone, let's talk about it. I've jotted down a script for this video, but I'll probably be rambling a bit too, and well, hopefully it's not too incoherent and riddled with inaccuracies. I'll also try to be as impartial as possible, which I understand is frustrating if you're firmly on one side or the other. The pro-Palestinians will be like, what's there to argue about? Stop withholding aid and killing little kids. Pro-Israel will be like, Hamas delenda est. Hamas must be destroyed, as Cato the Elder once said about Carthage. So what can we say? Well, let's first see if we can get anywhere with the why treatment. I think there's a good argument to be made that the word why is the most powerful of all words. Socrates knew this and it cost him his life, asking why. So let's do that and see how far we go, and hopefully we won't be forced to chug hemlock. Why is everyone furious at Israel? Why all these protests? Why have protesters even burned themselves to death? Because Israel has bombed Gaza back to the Stone Age and killed many thousands of Palestinians. Why? Because Gaza's governing body, Hamas, committed a massive terrorist attack in Israel. Why? Because Hamas is against Israel. Why? Because it opposes Israel's existence. Why? Because before 1948 there was no state of Israel, at least since ancient times, and Hamas feels that the Palestinians should have sovereignty over the land they claim is being occupied by Israel. Why? Because they feel the Israelis are colonizing invaders, and Palestinians have not had a chance to govern themselves as a sovereign nation. Why? Because Israel won a bunch of wars against surrounding Muslim nations and solidified its own statehood, whereas the Palestinians never had an official state called Palestine under their direct rule. Why? Because there was a British mandate in place before Israel. Why? Because the British were on the winning side in World War I and took over from the Turkish Ottoman Empire, which had ruled the land there previously. Why? Because the Ottomans invaded and pinched the land from the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, who had themselves taken over from the Ayyubids, who had taken over from the Crusaders, who had taken over from the Fatimids, who had taken over from the Arab Abbasid Caliphate, which had succeeded the Arab Umayyad Caliphate. This is where Islam first entered the region, which had invaded and taken the land from the Christian Byzantines, who had continued in ruling the area from the Roman Empire, which in the 1st century had invaded and taken the land that the Jewish Hasmonean kingdom had ruled since 140 BC, which before the Greeks had been ruling since the time of Alexander, who had invaded and taken the land from the Persians, who had invaded and taken the land from the Babylonians, who had invaded and conquered the Jewish kingdom of Judah, which had earlier escaped the fate of the northern Jewish kingdom, which was conquered by the Assyrians, and which earlier had been joined to Judah as the kingdom of Israel, whose formation and history is recounted in the Bible in the books of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, and which before had been ruled in a loose, fragmented way by the various tribes of Israel described in the book of Judges in the Bible, as well as their enemies, the Philistines on the coast, which before had been ruled by Canaanites, who were ruled by the new kingdom of Egypt for a few centuries, where before the Amorites had ruled, and before whom were various Bronze Age cultures. Why? Because people have always conquered other people. Why? Because they want land and stuff that they don't have. Why? Because they want to improve their lives and have what can accommodate this improvement. Why? Okay, let's just stop there. Why? Because we have to stop somewhere. Why? Stop! Israel, Palestine, whatever you want to call it, has clearly had a very troublesome, tumultuous history. Located at the crux of continents and wedged between warring superpowers, it's been contested by nations since the days when the wheel was the latest technology. But I'm interested in the conflict because the cleverest people in the world aren't able to solve it. The two-state solution is what they propose, and on the surface that seems politically to be the best solution. But in the long run, I don't think it would work. Probably not even in the short run either. In fact, not long after an actual country called Palestine is formed, the grievances of its population will not magically melt away, nor will the resentment against Israel and the anger that it still, though reduced in size, exists. The remembrance that once there was no Jewish state there and Muslims governed it completely will not fade away either. There will be a push for total control, and the question then arises, what happens to the Jews? Where do they go? They have a deep spiritual connection to this land that historical upheaval removed them from governing themselves. It's true there has been a Jewish presence in this land since very ancient times, even under the successive empires and later caliphates and so on. But in terms of a role of political power, let's just say that's been interrupted quite a bit. So what would happen to the Jews in Israel without Israel? Well, they're not real Jews, some argue. Send those Khazars off to Khazaria, that's where they came from. Well, that's no good because even if that theory is correct, the Khazar lands are largely Islamic, and the Jews would be no safer there than they would be in the middle of Mecca. And some argue again, look, if Israel colonized this area, didn't the Muslims do the same? They conquered it from the Christians who had ruled it for centuries before. And why can't Palestinians live in the enormous Muslim world? Well, because Palestine is their homeland, the answer is. But it's our homeland too, say the Jews. We spent 2,000 years wandering the earth, hoping and praying for the the restoration of our country. Yeah? And in so doing, you took away our country, say the Palestinians. No, you're free to live here. Yeah, but not free to run it. Yeah, because you'd kill us. Like you're killing us. Yeah, because you killed us. Because you're killing us. Because stop. What a mess. It doesn't matter how many handshakes are made with smiling American presidents in the background, or how many resolutions are made in the UN, or how many political or economic arguments are delivered by intelligent, well-meaning secular experts. The Muslims will always have a book saying the Jews are accursed. The Jews will always have a book saying the land belongs to them. To me, this means that any solution or peace agreement will never be lasting. Someone will always arise to remind the populace of the massive divisions between the people. If you could eradicate these religions, then the system could work, but realistically speaking, Islam and Judaism are not going anywhere, and so there cannot be, in my opinion, a true peace. Even if the two-state solution were enacted and both sides agreed to live side by side, I don't think the peace would last. And not only because historically peace never lasts, but because sooner or later a rabble-rouser will arise with grievances and announcements and remind people of the innate divisions between the beliefs of the Jews and Muslims. Hypothetical, you say? Perhaps. But remember, no matter what happens, the Muslims always have that book saying the Jews are cursed, and the Jews will have their book saying the land belongs to them, all the land. And I think this spiritual dynamic matters immensely, though the media and experts are oddly reluctant to discuss it. No one sings songs or composes poetry about subcommittees and signatures on documents. They write about what fills their hearts, and nothing fills the heart more than love and hate, and this is where religion comes in. Religion speaks to the heart more than any politician's rhetoric or the conclusions of a geopolitical theorist, and I believe it's religion that is paramount in this conflict. Muslims do not want a Jewish state in their vicinity. Jews do want a Jewish state to exist. Islam teaches the great final day will not occur until Muslims rise up and slaughter the Jews, and of course their Quran curses the Jews. But the Jews have an older book that declares the land is theirs, promised by God to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob whose name was changed to Israel. Now this is where the balanced secularist steps in to say, now that's all poetry and dreams. But no, it's an important and crucial part of the Islamic and Jewish psyches. It is the essential bedrock of their dual arguments for justice, and I can't see any political solution to it. It is a fact that Islam dominated the land for many centuries. A Jewish state disrupts this flow like a clog in a drain pipe, but Jews lost their nation and for many more centuries were without a homeland until 1948 and the formation of the State of Israel. For them, it is justice to have a country again and live in the land of King David and Solomon, the promised land that Moses led the Israelites to after their slavery in Egypt, something even the Quran acknowledges. But for the Muslims, the land is waqf, a sacred and eternal part of the Islamic world, and must never be surrendered. This was outlined in the 1988 Hamas Charter, a claim which Hamas's new charter did not repeat, but Hamas has not actually revoked or rejected the earlier charter or its claims. So, in short, I think a lot of the political headaches occasioned by attempting to resolve this conflict are a waste, because essentially it is the religious aspect of the situation that moves the hearts of the common people in the middle of the conflict, and there is no common ground between the two sides, because you can't have a compromise where, deep down, one side believes all the land should be theirs, and the other side, deep down, believes all the land should be theirs, and they can point to old texts saying so. Even if Israel and the Palestinians agree to create a Palestinian state, even one which does not recognize Israel, Palestinians will still invoke the idea of waqf, and that all the land should be theirs. From the river to the sea, remember? That's the whole land. And loud voices in Israel will cry treachery and invoke the Torah. And who would get Jerusalem? Both claim it as a sacred city. So this was my messy, disjointed, perhaps wrong string of thoughts about the whole situation, but I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you think a two-state solution would actually work? And do you think there is any actual political solution to the problem? Leave your thoughts below, but as for me, it's bye for now. Bye-bye!